All right, that sounds great, Una. Sounds great.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
I think viewers are definitely gonna like it. To hell with it.
Okay, wait, what?
That's like one of your best ideas ever. To hell with it.
Okay, I'm like super confused. You're gonna have to lay this one out for me.
You know what I think?
What?
Okay. Hi-ho.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's super clear now. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think I'm even more confused now.
Welcome to the CodeX Cantina. I am Una.
And I am Hi-ho? I'm Crypto.
It's like the right number of syllables. And today we are doing chapters 10 through 20 of Player Piano by Kurt Vonnegut. We're just going to jump straight into plot and then just go straight into discussion. So we're doing straight spoiler territory today.
Summarize.
So plot. After a night of debauchery, Paul finds Shepard in his office the next morning. Shepard has dealt with Kroner and the police on Paul's behalf in his absence. Kroner invited him over for a social visit, and the police want to talk to him for questioning. Paul is irate and kicks him out. When Paul goes home, he confides in Anita he slept with another woman. However, she's more upset if someone saw Paul than actually the infidelity itself. Later, Paul and Anita meet at Kroner's house, where the Pittsburgh job is offered to Paul, and he's questioned about his loyalty to Progress. Paul confesses to his fatherly figure how he's feeling. He's told to stay on the side of the river and to turn his friends in Finnerty and Lasher. That night, Paul makes up his mind he needs to quit his job. Paul begins fantasizing about a simpler life. He soon meets with Dr. Paul Pon, that's right, a doctor of real estate, about an old-fashioned farm that's available. There, they meet Mr. Haycox, the caretaker, who takes a little respect for titles and prioritizes know-how, as his family has cared for the farm for generations. At night, Paul takes Anita to the homestead, where she's mortified, as it was the life she almost had if she had not married Paul. He then takes her to the farmhouse, where she immediately falls in love with it. However, she jumps to picturing where she will relocate the antique items back to their current home in Ilium. Paul tries to correct her that he wants to live there at the farm and quit his job. Anita becomes upset and distracts him and has a hard time accepting the new Paul. Paul soon heads to the meadows to lead the blue team against Shepard, who leads the green team and has been training for the event. And I separate out the Shaw plotline just for continuity purposes.
Yeah, I think that was smart.
Shaw meets with Epicac, who can't answer his prophecy question, which means the machine is a false god in the belief system, yet Epicac controls more than the president. The Shaw then visits the average American family, where he compares them to the drama of live TV drama. Shaw gets a loquacious haircut. And then that's the plot. So now we're going to jump into discussion. So a quick little side note is I had a little realization about some of the names in this book. I don't know if you picked up on this, but like Anita, her name is I Need A, and she's the ambitious, materialistic one. I need a insert item. The company is called Ilium Works, which is funny because obviously it's a town that doesn't work. It's all been automated. Paul Proteus, I learned, is actually based on Charles Proteus Steinmetz, a GE employee. I'll put the link down below if you want to read more about him, but he was actually based on a GE real person. And then Lawson Shepard, Dr. Lawson Shepard, it's a play on words with what he does in terms of shepherding and kind of bringing in the law in a sense with the gun and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Have you noticed any other names having hidden meanings in this?
No, because ever since Epicac was mentioned, I tried to pick up on that, and I really didn't find any. So I thought those were pretty kind of cool. So I kind of thought with Kroner and Bear, I thought there might be something there, but I don't think there is. So, and of course, like Bud, Infinity, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it'll pop out later to us, and if you guys know, leave it in the comments below. But I thought today we needed to start out with talking about 1952. Because I feel like when you read this chapter, it's very easy to look at this and say, oh, Vonnegut is obviously being, misogynist. He's painting women in a horrible light. His characters are despicable. They don't like their lives, which I think while there's elements of truth to that, I think we need to talk about what was going on with the times to really understand why he painted things this way. I think that's a fair place to start, is it not?
No, I think it is, and that was one of my problems that I was having with reading the book, and I've said it before, was I felt it was dated, and I don't think that's fair to look on the past with our own current high moral standards or our wokeness, right? I don't think that's fair. So we really do need to go back to that 1952 mindset, because he was a man writing during that time. And even though we say he's a man out of his time, he still was influenced by what was going on in his own personal life. And that's authors. They're always going to do that, right? So I think it's important that you go into some of those details so that people feel like there isn't this negative attachment to Vonnegut as an author himself.
Right. So 1952, we're out of the World War II, right?
Yep.
Got a big economic boom. People are returning to work, high GDP. We've got cars, we've got materialism, we've got the baby boomers, people popping out them babies, right?
Yeah, they get home, they miss their wives.
We had the biggest military, and we also had I don't know if you knew this or not, I'm not the most well-versed, but the 50s were called the bleak era of feminism, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Because if you think about it, during World War II, for those that didn't know, a lot of men were out fighting the good fight, if you will, according to propaganda. But what happened to the jobs back home? And that's where you had women stepping into the workplace, right? You had Rivet Rosie, I think it was.
Yep.
That they were keeping America running while a lot of men were off defending a war, if you will. So you had, when the men came back, what happened to the women? And the women found a lot of purpose, a lot of value in working during the war, that when they came back and the men kind of expected to have their jobs done. I mean, maybe, sure, some wanted to give it up, but some of them, they got dignity out of their work, and being told that you need to go home and be, just a wife or just a baby-making machine. I don't think that was probably the best way to put, the women's rights weren't equal back then. So I think when I read this article about, the bleak era of feminism and how a lot of the women then were going through depression, they were being overprescribed antidepressants, that there was a lot of women asking, what is their place now in the world now that all these men are returning from war?
Yeah, and so during this time period, I think the women getting a little piece of freedom and then coming back and saying, well, wait a minute, we helped win this war too. You wouldn't have had bullets, blankets, guns, and boots if it wasn't for us. Women were the ones that were making everything, and they come back and they're being forced out of their jobs by men and told to go back to what they were, and they're not having it. Many of them were like, no, I'm happy having a job and making my own money and being my own person, and that was, I think, a conflict. And I think you see that with the Anita character, and where she's almost like, I don't know how to say it, but had she had a job during the war, her life would be very different, and she's playing that almost stereotypical 1950s housewife that never worked in a factory during the war, right? I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Well, and then they even had that line, this is a quote, "If he hadn't married her, Anita, this was where she'd be, what she'd be," when they were driving through Homestead. And she was mortified of this, what she viewed as a lower life, not having a purpose, if you will. She married into this lifestyle, this ambition that she wanted. And I think it's really interesting when chapter 12 is when I first noticed it, where I was like, oh, I think some people, if you look at this through modern eyes, it looks bad. Because they go into the Kroner's home, and Mama, Mrs. Kroner, says to her, tell me about yourselves. And Anita replies, we just redid our kitchen line.
Yeah.
Which is funny, because Anita is the ambitious one, and she's not talking about herself there. Tell me about yourself. We redid our kitchen.
Yeah, I thought that struck me as interesting and funny too, because I was like, that was a really weird way to reply, and I didn't know if that was like when you asked people back in the day of, that type of question, is that the way they would phrase it? Because nowadays you would probably talk about, oh, we're doing good. My son is this old and he's starting kindergarten soon. Like, you would talk more about your family or what's going on in your lives. And she immediately goes to her one thing that's important to her, and that's decorating and the kitchen, right?
Well, and to your point, whether it was or was not the way things came out back then, this is a Vonnegut story. He chose for Anita to talk about the kitchen, which in the 50s there was a lot of propaganda for women to return to that home life, to the babies, to the wives, to taking care of the kitchen.
Put the apron back on, yeah.
Put that apron back on, which by today's standards, in our wokeness, we we realize how wrong that is. But back then, there was propaganda to help push that along. Think about it this way. This is Kurt Vonnegut making a stance here where he is calling out this situation, and he's calling out how unhappy these people are.
Yeah, because Anita's super unhappy with that.
And I think we get a good balance, too, where, again, the Shaw line might not be done the best, but I think you get a good balance where we go to that other family, the average family. So if this is the average family and Paul's the top family, they're both having the same problems, right? Because remember, that husband cheated on that wife. And what did Anita just find out about Paul?
Yeah, he was sleeping with Barbara.
So you see that this is Vonnegut specifically making a societal issue by putting it in both of these storylines, right?
Yeah.
So, and I don't think Vonnegut's condoning it. Just because you put it in your text doesn't mean, as an author, you condone that activity. But he is one of the few authors at the time who is not condoning, put your apron on, be happy, you've got a place at home, that's where you should be. So I'm not saying this is the best example of feminism work, but I wouldn't look at this and groan and say, oh, they're talking about the kitchen. I think he's doing this on purpose. And I think if I was alive in 1952, this would be a little bit too on the nose for me at the time, because this was a hot topic at the time, was it not?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think he's using it here almost like reverse psychology. And again, maybe he was ahead of his time, and we should almost judge him from our stand and our viewpoints now of like, oh, now I see what he was trying to do with this. Because later in the story, Anita, the way it seems to be going is like she realizes that all the material possessions aren't making her happy, and maybe that there is a better way of doing things out there.
I didn't get that sense. Let's talk about that. So when Paul takes her to the farm,
yeah,
she loves the old stuff, right?
Yeah,
but she doesn't want to live amongst the new stuff. She wants to scavenge it and bring it back to her home in Ilium. So I took that as she's not trying to reintroduce herself into the old way of life. I looked at it as her as trying to modernize that old way of life and still keep her current standards and current idea of progress. Like she's a woman of progress. She's shrewd and she's ambitious, and she's pushing her husband to do things that the husband doesn't even want to do. She represents more of that progress aspect that for Kroner than what Kroner actually sees from Paul himself.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I just thought that she got excited about it, and that was the first time we saw really emotion from her that was not controlled. Through the rest of the whole story, anytime that she's an emotional person, she's controlled. And when they have a fight later on, or was it before this? They had the fight, and
that's when they have the fight, is at the farm.
Yeah, so the fight's taking place, and he says some really hateful things to her, and he says the thing about her having the late menstrual cycle and stuff, and I guess this is the first time that you don't have any controlled emotion from her, and I thought, oh, we're seeing the true Anita for the first time. And I think that probably for Vonnegut to be writing about early 1950s, the second feminist movement, is probably pretty tough, because you're always going to come off of, oh, well, you're a guy, what would you know? You don't have any viewpoint from this. And so that's probably really hard to write about. So he's doing the best that he can, and it's not perfect, but I think that we can try to deduce a lot from Anita as kind of our main female lead here.
Right. I think to your point, this is not a feminist work where I'd point to this. But I don't think I would point to this and say he's being hateful towards women. I think this is a good example of him satirizing a lot of the topics at the time, if you will. Like, all the other authors and newspapers are pushing towards return to the kitchen, and here he is saying, hey, they're not happy necessarily if you just push them into the kitchen. Like, they have a free will too.
I guess I was thinking, like, I guess the difference too that you can see with Anita is she doesn't necessarily, like, she wanted to go see the guns, and Mom didn't want to see the guns, and she's like, oh, let the boys play with their guns, that's men's stuff. And Anita's kind of like, well, I want to see the guns too. I don't know, I see her as progressive in other ways too. So
yeah,
I like Anita's character. She's growing on me. She's obviously a terrible person, but she's growing on me, and I see why she is the way she is, and that ultimately she's no worse a person than Paul. Like, he's not a saint. Like, he's obviously a terrible person too, but he's trying to be better, and I think she would be too if she was the main character of the story.
I got another one for you. So we talked. I think you brought it up last week about Vonnegut being very meta with how he writes about something, but it really means something else, right? I got a quote for you here. This is when he's setting his watch to the grandfather's click. Indulging an atavistic whim, he set his watch to correspond with the hands of the relic, which grated and creaked away the seconds, sounding like a wooden ship straining in the strong wind. Did you pick up anything from that quote?
Yeah, I definitely think that Paul is the watch, and he's changing, and he is going to evolve. And I think kind of what we talked about before of the story of where it's going is that, again, I haven't read this, that
right.
Paul is going to leave his job. He's going to go back to nature. He's going to try to help with the revolution, and going back in time, like to go back to the good old days of where there was not machines telling us what to do, and that there would be a place for people like his wife that are artistic, and people like Bud who are really creative, even though a machine doesn't think he's creative. Oh.
Do you think they'll succeed in their revolution?
No. This is Vonnegut. It will have a terrible, terrible, depressing ending.
Yeah. Now, you brought up some great points there where you were talking about progress, about how Paul's going to be the anti-progress, like the anti-machinery.
Yeah.
No. I keep saying that anti-machinery is definitely the wrong way to phrase this.
I like that phrasing.
Well, he's not against machines. He's against progress in machines taking away the purpose or dignity that people have in society. One of the things I thought about when they're talking about this, specifically, he set his modern watch to the grandfather clock. He's setting his time to the old time, right? That's part of like that meta conversation. But I also think in this part is where he's trying to introduce Anita into, horribly, by the way, this is going to be our new life. Like if I told my wife we're going to go churn butter and own a farm, she'd be like, are you kidding me? But what you see is they start talking about that clock and how it's made out of wood inside. Oh, we'll just replace it with some modern parts. Okay, I see what they're saying there. Go back to the beginning of this book where they started talking about seeing a ghost in the machine. You can't just replace a process or a machine with all being automated and take the man out of the picture, because then that takes away the dignity of that person, right? Here they're saying if you start gutting out this place of the internal clock workings, or if you start taking the rafters and moving it back home, or that iron kettle, you're taking away the dignity of what is a classic and old school colonial farm too. You can't, and I think what you're saying here too, it's just there's so many levels to this where you can't just take Anita and stick her into this old place and she'll have dignity. Right? Yeah. That's not what Anita wants. And I think that's the point that Vonnegut is getting to, is what is it that people want? If all you do is just make progress, like what Bud came up with, where it replaced his own job and 71 other workers, just taking progress for the sake of progress and not taking into consideration the human spirit and what's best for humanity is, in Vonnegut's view, like this is, I'm not saying I agree with him, is short-sighted, is what he's saying with this piece. That you can't just take away someone's purpose or dignity without thinking about it and just make progress for the sake of progress. Vonnegut's words, not mine, is what I think he's going for with this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's hard to find that perfect blend of like man and machine.
Did you want to bring up anything about Epic Hack?
There was the poem or riddle or whatever that the Shah says, and I didn't know if there was any deeper meaning to that. I don't know if, like, I didn't look up or anything. Is there an actual answer for it, or is it just something that Vonnegut, is it real? Did Vonnegut just pull that out of his butt and make it up and and make it so it sounded all philosophical and fancy? I don't know.
I did Google it. One guy put some answer on Reddit, and it was beyond my ability to understand it. But other than that, I saw nothing else that said this is what the answer is. So I think the point is, as Vonnegut was just saying, is that people are worshiping this machine. Like they put Epic Hack in charge of the U.S. and in charge of consumer goods. We saw in the short story it was going to be in charge of the military. This is Epic Hack, much later iteration, where we see it's in charge of more things.
Yeah, isn't it like number 14 or 19 or something like that? I can't remember which.
It's a higher number.
Yeah.
And so people put so much faith into machines in general, whether being automated or putting it in charge of making all these decisions. I think the point is just like it doesn't have all the answers. And by Shaw asking that, they're saying, hey, you're worshiping a false god, and you're all going to die of cholera.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, there were a few times that I laughed out loud at this. And I enjoyed that part. I think with the Epic Hack part, I think Vonnegut was kind of saying maybe, and I don't know if he was a very religious person or anything, but I was thinking to say that we don't have all the answers, and there's no way that we could probably make a machine or a computer that could give us those answers. And some things are just left better unknown, and that you can't solve all the world's problems, and nor can a machine, and that there is sometimes having to have faith. And you see that in the characters too, that a lot of the relationships in the book are breaking down because they don't have faith in one another. Paul doesn't have really faith in his wife. He's struggling to have faith in Finnerty. He obviously has no faith in his secretary. He has no faith in Shepard. I don't think he has any faith in himself. So you can see that his, not only is his life deteriorating, but the relationship that he's built is also that happening. And I think that the Epic Hack and the Shaw storyline kind of plays into that outside view of, well, just because you have all the best machines in the world doesn't necessarily mean that you have all the answers, because our primitive way of thinking, or he kind of says like the American ambassador makes fun of him for these like backwoodsy primitive people, that maybe they're still doing okay, despite not having all of the material prowess of 1950s post-World War III United States.
Yeah. Well, I think Vonnegut does a good job of pointing out that the Shaw's people are very similar to American people. They just do it different. People are people no matter where you go.
Yeah, people are people.
So, I think that's. I thought of one more thing when I asked you about is it going to go well? Do you remember? I just remember this. Do you remember what Paul said when he was in the bar and said that he was going to be the new Messiah, or what dream he had? I know it was a week ago that we had this part of the book, but do you remember what happened there?
I can't remember.
I think it's been a week, but I think if I recall correctly, he says either he has a vision or he says that they've got to meet in the middle on this bridge, and then his table collapses underneath him. And I'm almost positive that's foreshadowing for, him kind of trying to speak between the revolution and the automation side, progress side, and collapse happens is what I think that table means, basically.
Oh yeah, he's definitely dead. I have no.
You think he's gonna die?
I have no hopes for Paul getting out of this alive. I think that Slasher, is that the guy's name? The one of the Lasher, Finnerty, and Paul. They ain't making it to the sequel. Or if this is end of season 1, they're not making it to season 2, baby.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in today for our chat for chapters 10 through 20. Next week, we are doing chapters 21 through 29.
And your boy Crypto will probably only be audio because I'll be out of town, so you won't get to see my beautiful face.
Yeah, so expect some difference in editing, but it might be a little sloppier, just saying.
Yeah, you better be wearing a tie if they have to stare at you the whole time.
Okay, I'll step it up a little bit. I'll make the visual presentation worth it.
Just a
tie,
though.
All right, guys. Please consider subscribing and liking the video if you enjoyed what we talked about today. We post videos every Monday, Thursday, and we've been pretty consistent, about 3 videos a week, but we'll commit to those 2, we promise. So stay tuned for more, guys. Peace out.
Peace out.